In the year that the industry has collectively decided that PCs should look different, this is the SSUPD Xhuffle. Now, this thing has two modes. It's either a left-hand standing PC with its right and front panel made out of glass, or you can switch it into what SSUPD calls the horizontal mode, a right-hand standing PC which is deeper than it is high and where the left and top panels are made out of glass. Both modes are very interesting, and of course this is still a SSUPD case, so we got a freakishly long manual which explains everything in a painstaking detail. But before this video has to become even longer than it will be regardless of the manual, let's cover the Xhuffle bit by bit. There are two color options for this case, the white one and this black one. Standing on the table in its default mode, which SSUPD calls vertical, but I will from now on refer to it as tower because that just sounds cooler. Standing like that, the tower is 510mm high, 240mm wide and 416mm deep. And then if you turn it into the horizontal mode, the dimensions switch accordingly. Now, the case is actually small. Like, in total, we are looking at a 50-liter case. And if you compare that to alternatives that feature the same, let's say, level of compatibility, you are going to have a hard time because this thing on the inside, it is compact AF. Design-wise, it's definitely something unique. We got that sharp 90-degree angle where the two glasses or the two glass panels come together facing the user, whilst every other edge of the case is rounded off. If you want to open the case, every panel is just popped on, so all you need to do is just pop them off. However, when I first opened the case, I got the first taste of not so budget stuff. In fact, the pop mechanic that SSUPD used on here is by far the strongest I have seen in my life. It is so strong, when I first opened it up, I thought that there would be some screw hidden and I just can't pop it off because the screw is holding it in place. But no, you just need to pull like really hard every panel. That thing is really strong. And of course we got a ton of RGB, which is visible from almost every angle, but let's not get ahead of ourselves for now and start off with the baseline compatibility. And for each and every category, I will, for now at least, refer to the case in its tower mode. Even if I would describe this thing as being a small mid-tower, you aren't losing any compatibility whatsoever. Motherboard-wise, we can still fit the usual suspects from mini ITX up to regular ATX, but unlike a regular case, the motherboard is installed with the I/O facing up. Now, this is already something special. Not only does it force builders to think a bit differently as everything is rotated by 90 degrees essentially, but it also forced SSUPD to come up with, let's say, clever ways to make this work. One of which, of course, would be this plastic cover, to which we'll come back later on because it's also part of the cable management segment, but mainly it blocks your way to freely install the motherboard. And you got two possibilities. You can either slide the board in, which I did every goddamn time, or you can unhook it and remove it during installation, which I would recommend because installing the 24-pin with the bracket or with that cover is a pain in the ass otherwise, and I had to remove it every goddamn time after I installed the motherboard because I just couldn't get the 24-pin in, so just remove it. The next hurdle is what used to be the back I/O. With the board rotated, all of the I/O, including the GPU by the way, all of that is ending up inside the top panel. And up there we got a plastic cover which is locked in place using a little switch. If you want to open it up, you can just unlock it, pull the cover a few millimeters to the back and then just pull it away. Now, usually, or at least in the past, I hated how no matter how you design such a top panel containing the back I/O, it just sucked. But this time on here, SSUPD came up with a clever workaround, which kind of works for me. Inside the top panel, you got about 6.5 centimeters worth of space. This would be important if you use some sort of adapter, for example, like HDMI to DVI or vice versa. Whatever adapter you want to use, you need to know that number. And fun fact, the new wireless adapter from Lee to make the not so wireless fans even less wireless does not fit. It is too bulky. Yeah, there you go. Anyway, instead of making you hard decide during installation which cables you need for the rest of your life, changing your opinion isn't as painful as it usually is, we got this metal cover, which is kept in place using just 2 hooks and a magnet, and removing only this one gives you full access to your motherboard I/O. So in no shape or form do you have a restriction if you want to quickly access. Really cool approach, it works for me. The only access which would require to remove the whole panel or the whole plastic panel that hides the top is GPU connections. These are just out of range for that hole, for that little metal bracket with the hole, but I let that one slide considering how quick and easy it is to remove the whole panel. But if you want to connect something via cable, which should stay connected, let's say forever, like a mouse or a monitor, that's where this hole comes into play. In the back of the case, we got another hole which is partially covered using a similar metal plate found in the box of goodies. And how SSUPD imagined this to work is you slide your cable through the back hole, ignore that. Anyway, you go through one hole into another hole, and then you wind up in the top panel, and you can hard mount whatever cable you need semi-permanently, because there are also straps where you can attach cables like a mouse, a keyboard, a display, whatever. And if you only require quick access, because let's say you got all of the USBs blocked off by I don't know what, and you need to pop in a USB drive very quick, you have the metal bracket. So overall, even if the motherboard I/O is restrictive by nature for this type of layout or this type of design, SSUPD did a good job in my opinion to keep it as usable as possible. But what about GPUs? Well, that's where the treat of a case like this really begins. As the motherboard is rotated, the GPU is, too. And thus our frame generators are hanging in there and can be up to 380 millimeters long until you start hitting the bottom fans. And in depth we got about 170 millimeters, so no worries about giant NVIDIA octopies whatsoever. And by the way, this is also the number for air coolers. If the GPU can be up to 170 millimeters deep, let's say, your air cooler can also be 170 millimeters high, so yeah, up to 170 millimeter air coolers. If we are already here, let's also talk about cooling inside the Xhuttle in general. Out of the box, we got support for up to 9+1 fan spots, all of them 120 millimeters. 3 in the bottom, which are already pre-filled with reverse spinning 1300 RPM PWM controlled ARGB fans. So they are pulling air in from the bottom. We got another triple spot in the back, and a last one inside the top panel. And as much as I would love to just leave it at that, every part is so special we need to cover it block by block. Almost all the fans are mounted on a kinda hybrid bracket / rail system. The bottom ones too. The whole thing is secured using a single screw, and from there you just pull on the whole block and then you clip it out towards the back, and there you go. Of course, everything is already pre-cable managed, so if you want to keep the fans that are pre-installed in there, it's fine. They're not like particularly loud or anything, you just need to control them a bit, but they are fine. If you want to change them, you can do it externally and then reinstall the bracket again. To brief, these fans have a fabric dust filter in a plastic enclosure mounted on the bottom side of the case. It's okay, it's kind of cute considering how small it is, but it will do. And usually I would have said that 1.5 centimeters worth of space underneath the case isn't quite enough, but in reality it's a bit different here because the fans are slightly higher. The bracket itself pushes the fans up for like another centimeter or so, and that will essentially do. And the only real comment I got, but that's more like for the case in general, we got a filter on top of a mesh, or a giant hold mesh, which, yeah, the mesh is kind of necessary, but yeah, it's not that big of a deal. The back fan spots are designed in a very similar way. We got a triple 120mm bracket, which is locked in place using a screw, and you can unhook the whole thing and then take it out. And the overall design is very similar here. We got a giant mesh structure closed off with a magnetically attached dust filter. And thanks to the bracket, which pushes the fans about 1 centimeter away from the metal, SSUPD kind of made sure that there is no nasty sounds being created by the fans. And if you think about it, it's actually really good that the fans have this slight distance to the metal. Not only does this create an air pocket for the fans to like freely breathe, let's say, but this also renders that Nokia spacer, for example, or any other spacer just useless. The gap is built in by default, for free. And then of course we got some holes for cable management. So far everything was pretty standard, so let's get to the not so standard stuff. There are another 3 fan spots inside the top panel. Using the case itself and this bracket, we can mount another 3 120mm fans inside the top panel. For convenience sake, this bracket can also be removed, and once everything is back in, 2 of the fans are going to be installed using only 3 screws. But trust me that will do. Like, half my fans are mounted using only 2, so 3 is like top notch for me. And you are actually not that much size restricted here, because for my first build inside this thing, I actually used the 30mm thick Corsair fans, and that wasn't a problem at all. Now what might become a problem are 2-1 cables though, because as you can see, at least the last fan is protruding above the PCIe brackets. And in my particular case, or for my particular GPU, all of my connections were on a single PCIe line, and that combined with the fact that SSUPD was thoughtful enough to leave a little bit of a gap in between the last fan and the second last fan, or you can create the gap if you wanted to. Because of that, I was able to squeeze in the HDMI cable in between the fans, regardless of there being the fan. But if you use, let's say, multiple connections which are distributed across multiple lines, multiple brackets, PCIe brackets essentially, or you have like an adapter on top of an adapter. If you're in that case, you have to either use like short plugs, 90-degree angles, or you just don't install that third fan. But we are not done, because behind the motherboard, in the back of the case, we got this. This thing doubles as a drive bracket or a fan mount, because what you can actually do is install a regular 120mm fan into that bracket. Now, the usefulness of this is debatable, I would say. I haven't been able to come up with any sort of benchmark to determine if having or not having that fan blast air onto the backside of a socket is useful in any way, but in the very least we can say we got a fan mount. So there's that. Another quite impressive aspect for the Xhuffle is the radiator compatibility, because we can actually do dual 360s in here. The bottom mount supports 360mm rads on its own. Just please don't come with an AIO and mount the rad in the bottom, like with an AIO with the water block pump combo on the chip. That very bad idea. Don't do that. AIOs go onto the backside. The bottom is like for custom stuff only. And the back fan mount supports radiators as well. Again, up to 360mm. And the really cool thing is, in case your radiator is too big, as in the overhang is just like top and bottom is just too much, and it would start to hit on the bottom fans, which it would do in my particular case here. In that case, you can unhook the whole thing and reattach it higher, because yes, the fan bracket, or this particular fan bracket, has 2 positions, and doing so will push the radiator upwards into that hole which SSUPD conveniently left in case anybody wants to go crazy with their setup. And if you look closely at what I created here, I did go crazy. This is an Arctic liquid freezer in push-pull using 28mm thick Li fans, whilst leaving the original 3 fans in the bottom, and with 30mm thick Corsair RS120 Maxes in the top. It was, wow, I'm so proud. One take. I didn't stutter even once, but this is crazy. But at the same time, I had to install the radiator also in a very, very specific position so that everything fits. So yeah, you can go crazy, and it fits, but it fits. But let's make stuff easy here. If there is no rad in the bottom, so only the fans, there isn't really much to say for the back mount. If there is a radiator in the bottom, you will need to push it up. But the total height in the bottom cannot exceed about 55mm, or you will start pushing the rad basically out at the top. So max 55mm for the bottom, which would be a regular 25mm thick fan, as well as a also very regular 30mm radiator. So not really an issue here. For the back mount, SSUPD says it cannot be more than 90mm thick. Yeah, my 95mm thick monster kind of disagrees with that. That said, the hole in the top, which you might need to use, like I did, can be stuffed up to 115mm, but don't do 115mm thick push-pull combos on here. For me, for example, I couldn't go any further than this, because it would start to hit the water block pump combo, or the fan of the liquid freezer. So 95 is more like the limit I would aim for. For the top, no rats. A, there is no path for the tubes if you don't want to drill holes. And B, there is no way you won't block the GPU connectors with something. So just don't. So cooling wise, 170mm high air coolers or up to 2 rad setups, with the back one being able to do push-pulls. Or push-pull in the bottom if you really need to, with a shorter GPU, and you get the point. But before we jump to the next topic, let's also just briefly talk about the airflow path inside this thing here. By default, bottom air is in, makes perfect sense. But the back is versatile, essentially. On one side, we got a little video from SSUPD showing how they imagine this thing to work. So air in from the bottom and out in the back or top works great. But that would also end with more air going out than in, which means that air would stream in from the cracks, which might be a problem considering there is a pretty big crack all across the part where the two glass panels come together. So what I did was use the back as intake as well, which, considering how big this case is and the fact that this would be standing on a table right next to me and it's not like it's on the floor and just sucking in dust there. After all, it's supposed to sit on a desk, and for me that worked perfectly. And that ended up with air going in masses, and the 3 fans in the top are pulling it out at an incredible rate. And I'm not even joking, like this works fantastic. This exact build here that you're seeing is a 4900K combined with a 4080, and the before mentioned push-pull liquid freezer 3 and 360. And if we use the smoke to visualize what's going on here, the heat doesn't even stand a chance. This exact setup here, we got 82 degrees C on the package at 250 watts. We had 22, I believe, degrees C in the room. And the GPU was sitting at 81 on Firmark 4K all-in. Very, very good numbers. Of course, your mileage may vary and depending on the hardware that you choose, but at least the case does not create any restriction here. That said, the case is still not down, not even close. Next up is the I/O, of which we got 2. The right foot of the case, which would basically be, because now the case is facing like away from me, but it will be here, and then yeah, from my point of view, left foot, the right foot from the case, you get what I mean. Anyway, that part of the I/O features 2 USB 3.0 Type A's, a 3.2 Gen 2 Type C, and a combined audio in and out. And at the top of the case, we got a nice and clicky start button, and for the first time in my life, a ARGB controller that does not contribute to my suicidality. We got 4 buttons. One for motherboard sync. Yes, I kid you not, there is a dedicated button that goes straight to 3-pin ARGB control for motherboard. Why is this not the norm? Anyway, another button for modes, of which there are 12. Another button for color combination, of which there are 10 for each of the 12 modes, so my OCD is very satisfied here. And at last we got a switch to switch between the 4 speed levels. This thing is just amazing. It's powered by a SATA power connection. It can take 3-pin ARGB from your motherboard, and it actually freaking works. No more click 3 3/4 seconds to switch to motherboard control. No more long click to change the mode, but short click to change the color and double click to reset your PC whilst you pull out the plug because you are done. Every button does one thing and one thing only. It works. The images on the buttons are self-explanatory. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. This is ridiculous. It's simple, it works. Please, everybody, every manufacturer, just use that controller. I hate ARGB controllers. I prefer just to go like 3-pin ARGB from the motherboard and just do it via software. But yeah, this makes me not hate controllers anymore. And of course, you can expand if you want to hook more stuff to it. And now, before we get to the really extra stuff, we got 3 more little things. PSU drives and cable management. The PSU is easy. It is still sort of a dual chamber case after all, so the PSU sits in its own little compartment in the back, up to 190mm long, has the same breathable area on the pop-off back panel, just like the 120mm fan next to it. We can install up to 4 drives, 2 of which can be 3.5 inches on the bracket, which could potentially also house the 120mm fan. And the last 2 are 2.5 inch on that cable stuffing bracket behind the power supply. And by the way, theoretically, you can also install a 3.5 inch drive on that bracket if you align the 3 square holes, but I don't know, I feel like there needs to be some sort of gap in between a metal sheet and a physical, or a spinning hard drive. I don't know, it just doesn't feel that right. For the cable management, I gotta say I didn't expect it, especially because the case is kinda like stuffed. It's a stuffed mid tower, but the cable management is very well planned, it is smart and not hard at all. SSUPD even has an image in their manual explaining what the easiest route for every cable is. And to be honest, it just works perfectly. Sure, if you want to use push-pull reds, you might want to connect the CPU power cable beforehand. But other than that, all the connections are ridiculously accessible. Like, all the bottom connectors of the motherboard are very easy to reach, as there is nothing blocking their way, and once you got the glass out essentially. And even all the usually like right hand stuff is very easy to reach once that plastic bracket is removed. And once you're done, you can use all of the strips behind this door to stuff all of your cables in, and then you just close it down again, hide the mess you've created, and all in all, it was incredibly easy. And even the little door has like a dual lock system. The screw is one, and then you got two little plugs that just keep it in place. You can stuff a lot of cables in there. And it's not only that, also in the top we got some help to semi-permanently attach display cables so that they aren't in the way in case you need to quick access stuff. And in general, between the back of the motherboard plate and the back panel, where we got some more Velcro ties, just for the fun, there we got about 3.5 centimeters worth of space. So given that this is a very small case, you have a ridiculous amount of space and possibilities to cable manage. And there is one more thing. I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but this black piece here hides the 24-pin cable, which usually is also the one which is most visible. So in the end, you don't really need any colored cables with this case. I mean, you can use them if you want. For example, the GPU cable, which usually would be routed, I routed it to the front, but you could route it to the back. That would be the only one which is really visible. But in fact, once you are done, there isn't so much cable to look at. So if you don't want to invest more money into fancy looking cables, which I mean you can still do, but the case kind of gives you the option to create a somewhat cable hiding, let's say, build, which is kind of cool. As a last little extra, we got a cool little GPU anti-sag bracket. This one is movable and reinstallable even lower in case you got like really big cards like we do, and I had to install it again and again and again to the lowest point because the card is just ridiculously big. But yeah, that thing is kind of cool. And honorable mention here, SSUPD offers a file for a 3D printable pump holder in case you want to go full custom. And you can print this thing, which then sits nicely on this edge here, which is kind of cool. Or you can use the already present spacings in the back to mount the pump up there. Works too. And now coming to what SSUPD calls the horizontal mode, which I would just call desktop mode because it transforms the case into a regular freaking desktop. First, we need to remove all the feet, including the one that keeps the I/O in place. And yes, you will need to pull out all the cables. And this mini plastic clip hidden next to where the motherboard I/O would be. Then we need to pre-install the PSU extension cable, which is included in the box of goodies. You don't really need to do this, but it's the only way so that you have quick access to the main power cord later on. And then we need to reinstall the feet on the side where we used to have the back intake or exhaust. And this plastic clip, which we just removed, goes onto the right-hand side of it, and it makes sure that there isn't any weight pushing on the PSU cable later on. And then you just turn it around, you reinstall the GPU anti-sag bracket, because now the GPU is basically sagging into the other direction, and voila! We now have a right-hand standing case with a glass panel in the top and one on the left side. And to be honest, I'm not even sure which is the more unusual approach, the original state of the case or this here. I haven't seen any of these in the wild yet. It's definitely an eye-catcher, both of them. Still very unsure if I want the glass in the top, but in the very least, it's something different. The go-to airflow path, of course, changes again. Now we got the removable, which used to be top panel in the front, and now it just makes sense to turn the fans around and then have them be intake. Makes perfect sense. If I would guess, I would say bottom stays in, or now becomes in, which is basically what I have here, just turned around twice. So we still got 2 in, 1 out. It's just, yeah. So the SSUPD Xhuffle, I love that thing. I love how it looks, I love how it functions, and let me tell you, it does a great job at that. I love how it feels, great metal work. Thick 1.25mm thick plates, 3mm tempered glass, the best built-in ARGB controller until today. But what I appreciate the most is how much thought was put into every aspect of this. Nothing about this was left unthought of. Every cable has a route, every panel has a way or multiple ways of being installed. Every gap is there for a reason. You can use nice looking cables or you don't, and if you do, there is plenty of space to get the cables through. Everything is thought of, and where that shines most, for me at least, is the manual. Whoever wrote that thing, give him a raise. He did a great job. If they tell you to route the USB Type-C cable like this, route the USB Type-C cable like this. It's usually the easiest way. If you do custom stuff, do whatever the hell you want, but if you just do a quick build, just do what they say. The only thing I do not agree with is this video. I don't like my PC to be a giant dust collector. On a table, I would just do bottom and back intake and enjoy my turbocharged air convection machine. And the thing that bothers me most, but that's also just high-level lagging, I'm not particularly happy that this top panel here is made out of plastic. Everything else feels so high quality that the top one just stands out because it's plastic. I mean, the color choice is even somewhat close, and they didn't do a bad job with that. It's just, I don't know. Maybe I just don't like plastic. And price-wise, I gotta say, I wasn't disappointed. 135 euros and 95 cents right now. And I think that's fine. I mean, it's not revolutionary. It's not like SSUPD would pay me to buy the case, but the price is really okay. So if you're looking for a not that expensive, small 50-liter mid-tower that can house giant GPUs up to dual 360 rads, you can do giant air coolers or big air coolers, let's say, with a nice bottom-to-top airflow path. This thing, and if the design of course generally suits you, this thing is awesome. I'm all for it. But okay, this should be everything on the SSUPD Xhuffle, and at this point a huge thank you to SSUPD for sending this beast here over. I really like it. Oh, on a side note, we have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And we got channel membership, so if you are planning to sell your soul for an RG poop emoji, that's one way to go. But if not, I'm also releasing the content to all members 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Except for the NDA stuff, because, you know, I don't want to get sued. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to copyright the name Tesla. If SSUPD changed Xhuttle to Xhuttle, I can, I think, predict what the next step is. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to keep going, have a look at the video where we slapped 8 euros worth of thermal pads onto a not functioning all-for-cool water block. It's incredible what a few millimeters can do. Hope to see you on the next one. Bye bye.